I never wanted to be someone's financial safety net until I didn't want to be anymore. What started as supporting my girlfriend's artistic dreams slowly transformed into funding a lifestyle that made me feel invisible in my own relationship. I'm Felix, 29, an aerospace engineering consultant in Phoenix pulling in about $140K annually, and for the past 4 years, I'd been bankrolling Bryn's journey as a freelance ceramics artist while she chased what she called her creative vision. I covered 80% of our downtown loft rent at $2,400 a month, paid off her $18K art school debt without blinking, and even funded her failed pop-up pottery studio that specialized in abstract sculptural pieces that never sold to anyone except her increasingly pretentious social circle. The studio lease alone cost me $3,200 monthly for 8 months before we finally admitted it wasn't working, not to mention the $12K I dropped on kilns, pottery wheels, and specialized glazing equipment that now collected dust in our storage unit. I told myself I was investing in us, in her potential, in building something together where my practical engineering income could support her artistic pursuits until she found her footing. The math worked on paper, and I genuinely admired her passion for creating these intricate ceramic forms that seemed to capture something I couldn't quite understand but respected. Bryn had this way of talking about clay and form that made me believe she was touching something profound, something that my analytical mind couldn't access but could certainly appreciate from the outside. When we first met at a gallery opening 4 years ago, she'd been drawn to my stability and success, calling my career fascinating and asking endless questions about satellite design and orbital mechanics. Then Bryn started hanging around Tessa, this lifestyle blogger who wrote about power couple dynamics and executive-tier relationships, filling Bryn's head with ideas about what successful partnerships should look like. Tessa ran this blog called Elevated Unions that had maybe 15K followers but acted like she was running some kind of relationship empire, constantly posting about how creative women needed partners who matched their artistic energy rather than dragging them down into mundane practical concerns. Her content featured endless photos of aesthetically perfect couples in expensive settings, always emphasizing how both partners contributed equally to their shared creative vision rather than falling into traditional provider-dependent roles. Suddenly, my prestigious engineering career, the thing that had originally attracted Bryn and provided our financial stability, became a source of embarrassment at dinner parties and art shows. Tessa's content promoted this toxic ideology that analytical minds were fundamentally incompatible with artistic souls, and that true creative partnerships required both people to operate on the same elevated wavelength of intuitive thinking rather than one person supporting the other's dreams through practical means. I watched Bryn absorb these concepts like gospel, slowly viewing my structured approach to life as creatively suffocating rather than supportively stable. Where she used to appreciate my methodical planning for our future, asking me about retirement accounts and house down payments, she now saw limitation and smallness in every spreadsheet I created. My engineering projects, which involved designing guidance systems for satellites and required intense precision and innovation, were dismissed as corporate drone work that lacked soul and vision. The irony wasn't lost on me that my work literally helped navigate objects through space, requiring more creative problem-solving than most art projects. But Tessa's influence had convinced Bryn that anything involving mathematics or systematic thinking was inherently anti-creative. The woman who once bragged about dating an aerospace engineer to her art school friends now seemed ashamed to mention my career at gallery openings and artist meetups, often deflecting questions about what I did for work or introducing me vaguely as someone who worked in tech. I found myself defending my profession to people who equated analytical thinking with creative bankruptcy, while Bryn stood silently beside me, no longer proud of what I accomplished or even willing to correct their misconceptions about what aerospace engineering actually involved. The shift was gradual but unmistakable, like watching someone slowly stop seeing you as a person and start seeing you as a function, a means to an end that was becoming increasingly inconvenient to acknowledge. 4 years of building what I thought was a partnership had somehow evolved into me feeling like an unwelcome guest at my own life, funding a dream that no longer included space for who I actually was or what I brought to the table beyond my paycheck, watching the woman I loved slowly disappear into a version of herself that seemed to find my very existence embarrassing. The breaking point came at an exclusive gallery opening for emerging artists, one of those pretentious downtown events where everyone wore black and spoke in hushed tones about artistic vision while sipping overpriced wine. I'd reluctantly agreed to attend because Bryn was showcasing 3 of her ceramic pieces, and despite everything, I still wanted to support her work. The gallery space was stark white with polished concrete floors that echoed every footstep, filled with people who looked like they'd stepped out of art magazines, all carefully curated aesthetics and practiced intellectual poses. I wore my best dark suit, hoping to fit in with the crowd while feeling completely out of place among people who seemed to communicate in coded artistic language that I'd never quite learned to speak fluently. I was standing near Bryn's display, genuinely admiring the craftsmanship of her latest sculptural series, when this venture capital associate named Marcus approached us with the kind of aggressive confidence that immediately set my teeth on edge. He was Tessa's current partner, perfectly styled in an expensive suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, and he had this way of talking that made every conversation sound like a business pitch designed to establish his superiority. Marcus had apparently heard that I worked in aerospace and decided to lecture me about investment opportunities in the space industry, dropping names of companies he claimed to have connections with while demonstrating a fundamental misunderstanding of how satellite technology actually functioned. When I politely corrected some of his more glaring technical misconceptions about orbital mechanics and payload deployment, he laughed condescendingly and told the gathered crowd that my cautious approach to startup investments revealed typical corporate drone mentality, suggesting that people like me were exactly why revolutionary companies struggled to find proper funding from conservative thinkers who couldn't envision disruptive possibilities. The humiliation stung. But what devastated me was watching Bryn's reaction as she stood there listening to this pompous venture capitalist dismiss everything I'd accomplished in my career. Instead of defending me or even staying neutral, she actually nodded along with his assessment, her expression showing agreement with his characterization of my analytical mindset as fundamentally limiting and incompatible with innovative thinking. When Marcus moved on to charm other guests, Bryn turned to me with this embarrassed look and suggested we mingle separately for a while, essentially abandoning me in the middle of a room full of her friends who now saw me as some kind of creativity-killing corporate robot. The rejection felt like a physical blow, watching her choose social acceptance among these pretentious strangers over basic loyalty to the person who'd been supporting her dreams for 4 years. I spent the next hour watching from across the room as she laughed with Tessa's circle, occasionally glancing my way with what looked like apologetic resignation, as if my presence at her artistic moment was something she had to endure rather than celebrate. She moved through the crowd with newfound confidence, discussing her work and artistic philosophy with people who clearly appreciated her creative vision in ways that she felt I never could. The final blow came when I overheard her conversation with Marcus and 2 other artists near the sculpture installation, where she openly mocked my structured approach to life as creatively suffocating thinking that prevented her from fully embracing her artistic potential. She described our relationship dynamic as exhausting, explaining that she constantly had to translate between my analytical worldview and her intuitive creative process, making it sound like loving me was a burden she'd been carrying for years rather than a partnership she'd chosen. When someone asked if she thought opposites could really attract long-term, Bryn laughed and said that emotional liberation required surrounding yourself with people who elevated rather than limited your vision, strongly implying that I fell into the limiting category of people who held back creative souls. She talked about feeling trapped in conversations about budgets and practical concerns when what she really craved was inspiration and artistic collaboration with someone who understood her wavelength. But the absolute worst moment came when Marcus asked her directly what her artist friends thought about her dating someone so conventional, and Bryn responded without hesitation that most of them saw me as a financial placeholder rather than a creative equal, someone who served a practical function but couldn't contribute to her artistic evolution in any meaningful way. She admitted that she'd been feeling exhausted pretending our values aligned when clearly we operated on completely different wavelengths, and that she was ready to prioritize relationships that actually nurtured her creative spirit instead of constraining it with spreadsheets and 5-year plans that reflected a fundamentally mundane approach to life. Standing there listening to the woman I'd supported unconditionally for 4 years describe me as a creative obstacle to a room full of strangers felt like watching my entire relationship get dissected and dismissed in real time, every sacrifice I'd made reduced to evidence of my fundamental inadequacy as a partner worthy of an artist's love and creative respect. The end came not with a dramatic confrontation or tearful goodbye, but with a text message that arrived at 2:47 on a Tuesday afternoon while I was reviewing satellite trajectory calculations at my desk. Bryn had left that morning for what she called an artist residency weekend in Sedona, some retreat focused on creative breakthrough and personal transformation that Tessa had organized for her inner circle of enlightened artists. I'd helped her load her car with ceramic supplies and given her money for gas and food, still playing the supportive partner role even after the gallery humiliation because I genuinely wanted her to find whatever creative fulfillment she was seeking. The message was brutally efficient in its cruelty, delivered with the same casual indifference she might use to cancel dinner plans or reschedule a pottery class. She wrote that the weekend had given her clarity about what she needed in life, and that our relationship represented everything holding her back from becoming the artist she was meant to be. She explained that my analytical approach to life was fundamentally incompatible with her creative spirit, and that she'd finally found the courage to prioritize her artistic evolution over comfortable mediocrity. The message continued with accusations that I'd been subtly controlling her creative process through financial dependency, making her feel obligated to consider my practical concerns when what she really needed was complete freedom to explore her artistic vision without compromise. She claimed that every conversation about budgets or future planning felt like chains around her creative soul, and that she deserved a partner who understood that true artists couldn't be constrained by conventional relationship expectations or bourgeois concerns about stability. The final paragraph was particularly savage, stating that she'd realized during the retreat that I represented a chapter of her life she needed to close in order to embrace her authentic artistic identity. She thanked me for the financial support but made it clear that she viewed our entire relationship as a necessary but ultimately limiting phase in her personal development, something she had to experience and then transcend to reach her full creative potential. The message ended with the devastating declaration that she never wanted to hear from me again, followed by complete radio silence that made it clear she'd already blocked my number and moved on to whatever artistic enlightenment awaited her in Sedona. Instead of the devastation I expected to feel, I experienced something completely unexpected, profound relief mixed with crystal-clear recognition of the profound disrespect she'd just demonstrated. 4 years of partnership, and she couldn't even manage a phone call or face-to-face conversation to end things properly, choosing instead to deliver her breakup manifesto via text while hiding behind 100 miles of desert distance. The cowardly exit strategy told me everything I needed to know about her character and the kind of person I'd been wasting my emotional energy on for years. I sat at my desk staring at the message for exactly 3 minutes, watching my colleagues move around the office in their normal routines while my relationship officially died via smartphone notification, and realized I felt more angry about the method than heartbroken about the outcome. That evening, instead of wallowing or calling friends for emotional support, I did something that surprised even me. I opened my laptop and began methodically documenting every financial commitment we shared, every lease agreement with my name on it, every utility account and subscription service that connected our lives together. I created detailed spreadsheets tracking 4 years of shared expenses, calculated exactly how much money I'd invested in her artistic dreams, and began researching the legal requirements for lease termination and utility disconnection in Arizona. The engineering mindset that Bryn had found so creatively suffocating suddenly became my greatest asset, allowing me to approach our separation with clinical precision rather than emotional chaos. I spent the next 3 hours creating what I privately called my extraction plan, a comprehensive strategy for removing myself completely from every aspect of our shared life before she returned from her transformative weekend retreat. By midnight, I had contacted my fraternity brother Wade, who worked in residential moving services, scheduled utility disconnections, researched lease termination fees, and begun identifying everything in our loft that belonged specifically to me versus items we'd purchased together. The woman who'd just declared she never wanted to hear from me again was about to discover that I was exceptionally good at honoring that specific request, and that my analytical approach to problem-solving could be applied just as effectively to relationship termination as it had been to satellite guidance systems. While Bryn extended her transformative artist retreat by an additional week to fully embrace her creative breakthrough, I orchestrated what I privately called Operation Clean Slate with the methodical precision that had made me successful in aerospace engineering. Wade arrived Thursday morning with 2 other guys and a moving truck, and we began the systematic extraction of every item I'd purchased during our 4-year relationship. The expensive sectional sofa I'd bought when we first moved in together, the 65-inch smart TV I'd saved for months to afford, the kitchen appliances including the high-end coffee machine that Bryn used every morning but never thought to buy herself. We carefully dismantled the smart home automation system I'd personally installed over several weekends, removing every sensor, smart switch, and automated device that had turned our loft into a efficiently managed living space. The entertainment center, the dining room furniture, the expensive mattress and bed frame from our bedroom, even the artwork I'd purchased from local galleries to support Bryn's artistic community, everything that bore my financial fingerprint disappeared into the moving truck with military precision. Wade commented that he'd never seen someone approach a breakup move with such thorough planning, noting that most people forgot half their belongings and had to return awkwardly for forgotten items, but my spreadsheet inventory ensured nothing was overlooked. I disconnected and packed my home office setup, including the dual-monitor workstation where I'd spent countless evenings working on projects while Bryn created her ceramic pieces in the corner studio space I'd helped her design and equip. The irony wasn't lost on me that the same organizational skills she'd found creatively suffocating were now allowing me to disappear from her life more efficiently than she'd probably thought possible when she sent that dismissive text message. By Friday afternoon, we'd removed every trace of my existence from the loft except for a few pieces of furniture that belonged specifically to Bryn and the ceramic equipment I'd purchased for her studio space, which I left as a final gesture of support for her artistic dreams. I contacted the property management company and paid the lease termination fees immediately, ensuring that Bryn would assume complete financial responsibility for the rent she could never afford on her sporadic ceramics income. The utility companies received my disconnection requests scheduled for the following Monday, meaning she'd return from her enlightening retreat to discover that electricity, gas, internet, and water services were now entirely her responsibility to maintain. I closed our shared bank account after transferring her portion of the remaining balance, canceled every subscription service from Netflix to Spotify that I'd been paying for, and removed her from my phone plan, my car insurance policy, and my health insurance family coverage. The systematic dissolution of our intertwined lives felt surprisingly therapeutic, each canceled service and transferred responsibility representing another step toward complete independence from someone who'd made it clear she found my practical contributions more burdensome than valuable. My final act was leaving a printed copy of her "I never want to hear from you again" text message mounted in a simple black frame on the kitchen counter, accompanied by a professional note written on my company letterhead that read, "Request acknowledged and implemented, Felix." The note included my forwarding address for any mail and a brief explanation that I'd honored her desire for no further contact by removing myself completely from her life and all shared financial obligations. I changed my phone number that afternoon, blocked her on every social media platform despite her having already blocked me, and submitted a change of address form to ensure that any mail sent to our former shared residence wouldn't reach me. Wade helped me move my belongings to a furnished apartment in Scottsdale that I'd secured with a 6-month lease, a modern place with mountain views and amenities that I could easily afford on my salary without subsidizing anyone else's lifestyle. The apartment came fully equipped with everything I needed, allowing me to start fresh without any furniture or possessions that carried emotional baggage from my relationship with someone who'd viewed my support as creative oppression. That first night in my new place, I ordered takeout from an expensive restaurant I'd never been able to afford while covering Bryn's portion of our monthly expenses, opened a bottle of good wine, and sat on my temporary balcony looking out at the desert landscape while calculating exactly how much money I'd save each month without funding someone else's artistic aspirations. The silence felt profound after 4 years of constant negotiation and financial strain, and for the first time in months, I could plan my future without considering how every decision might impact someone who'd ultimately decided I wasn't worth keeping around anyway. Bryn returned to Phoenix the following Tuesday to discover a completely empty loft and immediately called the police to report what she assumed was a burglary, apparently unable to comprehend that someone might voluntarily remove their own possessions from a shared living space. The responding officers found my framed note on the kitchen counter and quickly determined that no crime had been committed, leaving Bryn alone in an echoing space that suddenly required her to manage every aspect of adult living without my financial safety net. Her initial attempts to contact me failed spectacularly due to the comprehensive blocking system I'd implemented across every possible communication channel, forcing her to get creative with increasingly desperate outreach strategies that revealed the depth of her panic. She started by creating multiple fake email addresses with names like concerned_friend_2023 and Phoenix_artist_collective, sending messages that began with casual inquiries about whether I'd received her previous communications before escalating into lengthy explanations of how the artist retreat had given her perspective on our relationship dynamics. The first wave of emails focused on rage-filled threats about the legal consequences of my sudden departure, accusing me of criminally abandoning our shared responsibilities and threatening to sue me for breach of contract despite never having any formal agreements beyond the lease I'd legally terminated. She contacted her father's attorney friend who apparently explained that removing your own possessions and paying termination fees constituted perfectly legal behavior, not the financial abandonment she'd hoped to prosecute me for in court. When the legal intimidation strategy failed, her communications shifted toward emotional manipulation tactics, with messages acknowledging that Tessa's influence had been toxic and promising that she'd undergone radical personal transformation during her extended retreat experience. She claimed to have gained profound insights about the value of practical partnership and admitted that she'd been foolish to prioritize artistic pretension over genuine connection with someone who'd consistently demonstrated love through actions rather than words. The emails became increasingly desperate as utilities began getting disconnected and she realized the full scope of her financial situation without my income supplement, begging me to at least respond to her messages so she could explain how much she'd learned about appreciation and gratitude. She promised to cut all contact with Tessa's circle, to value my engineering career properly, to contribute equally to our shared expenses, and to never again make me feel ashamed of my analytical approach to life. When I maintained absolute radio silence across all platforms, completely ignoring every email, social media attempt, and third-party message, Bryn intensified her campaign by recruiting friends to send communications on her behalf using their devices and accounts. Her pottery class instructor sent a Facebook message claiming that Bryn was experiencing a mental health crisis and needed my support during this difficult transition period, while her college roommate called my office pretending to need aerospace consulting services before launching into a speech about second chances and forgiveness. The most pathetic attempt came when she somehow obtained random phone numbers and began sending text messages from different area codes, composing extensive manifesto-style communications that outlined her supposed epiphany about my true value as a partner. These messages read like desperate sales pitches, listing all the ways she planned to demonstrate appreciation for my stability, financial responsibility, and practical contributions to our relationship if I'd only give her one chance to prove her transformation was genuine. She wrote detailed explanations of how the artist retreat had made her realize that creativity and analytical thinking weren't mutually exclusive, claiming that she now understood how my engineering precision actually enhanced rather than limited her artistic vision. The messages included specific promises about lifestyle changes, financial contributions, and behavioral modifications, as if our relationship was a business proposal she could renegotiate with better terms and improved offerings from her end. She even attempted to reach me through professional networking sites, creating fake LinkedIn profiles for fictional art businesses and sending connection requests that immediately launched into personal appeals about our shared history and her desperate desire for reconciliation. The progression from angry threats to tearful begging to elaborate manipulation schemes revealed exactly the kind of person I'd been supporting for 4 years, someone whose primary response to losing a valuable resource was to deploy every psychological tactic she could imagine to regain access to my financial stability and emotional labor. Throughout the following 10 months, I channeled every ounce of energy that had previously gone into managing Bryn's emotional needs and financial crises into advancing my aerospace career with laser-focused determination. The mental clarity that came from eliminating constant relationship drama allowed me to tackle a revolutionary satellite guidance system project that had been languishing on my desk while I'd been distracted by ceramic studio rent and artist retreat expenses. I worked late nights and weekends fine-tuning the navigation algorithms, collaborating with NASA contractors, and presenting innovative solutions that caught the attention of senior management in ways my previous work had never achieved. The project involved developing precision guidance systems for next-generation satellites, requiring the same analytical thinking that Bryn had found so creatively oppressive but that actually represented cutting-edge innovation in aerospace technology. Within 8 months, my breakthrough work on autonomous orbital correction protocols secured me a promotion to Senior Engineering Director with a 35% compensation increase that brought my annual salary to nearly $190K, more money than I'd ever imagined earning in my 20s. I transitioned from my temporary Scottsdale apartment to a luxury penthouse in Paradise Valley, complete with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic mountain views and a private balcony where I could set up my telescope for stargazing sessions. The apartment featured smart home automation that I installed myself, creating a perfectly engineered living environment that responded to my preferences without requiring compromise or negotiation with someone who found technology overwhelming. I began intensive rock climbing training at a local gym, discovering that the same problem-solving skills I used in engineering translated beautifully to analyzing routes and developing techniques for challenging climbs that pushed my physical and mental limits. The sport connected me with other goal-oriented professionals who appreciated precision, preparation, and the satisfaction of achieving objectives through methodical effort rather than hoping inspiration would strike randomly. I joined an exclusive astronomy club that met monthly for desert stargazing sessions, surrounding myself with people who shared my fascination with mathematical precision and the elegant engineering required for space exploration. The group included university professors, aerospace engineers, and serious amateur astronomers who could discuss orbital mechanics and stellar evolution with the same passion that Bryn's friends had reserved for discussing artistic vision and creative authenticity. Meanwhile, Bryn's circumstances deteriorated rapidly as reality imposed the financial consequences of her artistic pretensions without my income supplement. Unable to afford the downtown loft on her sporadic ceramic sales, she was forced to move back to her parents' cramped suburban home in Flagstaff, a humiliating retreat that effectively ended her Phoenix art scene aspirations. Her social media posts shifted from confident artistic statements to increasingly desperate attempts to maintain relevance among a creative community that had largely forgotten about her once her benefactor disappeared. Tessa's influencer circle promptly discarded her when they realized she no longer had access to the financial resources that had made her useful for expensive group activities and exclusive events. The lifestyle blogger who had poisoned Bryn against my practical contributions moved on to cultivating relationships with other women whose partners could fund her aspirational content and luxury experiences. I maintained my unwavering communication blackout despite Bryn's persistent attempts to penetrate my defenses through increasingly creative channels, including fabricated business inquiries sent to my aerospace company and fake LinkedIn profiles designed to look like professional networking opportunities. She even attempted to reach me through my university alumni network, sending messages through former classmates claiming she needed aerospace engineering consulting for a ceramic art project that required technical precision. Her desperation became almost comical as she tried to manufacture legitimate reasons for contact, apparently unable to accept that someone could completely remove themselves from her sphere of influence. The woman who had declared she never wanted to hear from me again now seemed incapable of accepting that I'd honored that request with the same thoroughness I applied to satellite guidance systems, creating an impenetrable barrier around my new life that she couldn't breach regardless of which manipulation strategy she deployed. The contrast between my flourishing career trajectory and her downward spiral felt like validation of every choice I'd made since receiving that dismissive text message. Proof that removing toxic influences from your life creates space for genuine success and personal growth that benefits everyone except the people who were holding you back. The final confrontation arrived at a prestigious Aerospace Innovation Awards ceremony 18 months after Bryn's text message breakup, where I was receiving recognition for my revolutionary satellite guidance breakthrough alongside industry leaders and government contractors. The Phoenix Convention Center ballroom was filled with the kind of people who actually understood and appreciated technical innovation, a gathering that represented everything Bryn had dismissed as creatively bankrupt corporate drone thinking. I wore my best charcoal suit and felt genuine pride as they announced my achievement in developing autonomous orbital correction protocols that had revolutionized precision navigation for next-generation satellites, work that required exactly the kind of analytical thinking Bryn had found so artistically incompatible. During the networking break following my acceptance speech, I was discussing potential collaboration opportunities with a NASA contractor when I noticed someone taking photographs near the catering display, a freelance event photographer working for the venue's catering service. It took me several moments to recognize Bryn behind the professional camera equipment. Her appearance dramatically changed from the confident artist I'd known into someone who looked worn down by financial stress and diminished circumstances. She'd lost weight, her clothes seemed less expensive and carefully chosen, and there was something defeated about her posture as she moved through the crowd documenting other people's success and achievement. When she spotted me across the room, her expression cycled through surprise, panic, hope, and something that looked like desperate calculation as she realized she'd stumbled into an opportunity she'd been trying to create for over a year. She approached me during a lull in conversations, camera hanging around her neck like a shield, her voice trembling slightly as she requested a private discussion about what she called repairing our damaged connection. Her words came out in a nervous rush, explaining that she'd been working photography gigs to support herself while trying to rebuild her ceramic art practice, admitting that leaving Phoenix and losing her social network had been more devastating than she'd anticipated when she made her impulsive retreat decision. She looked around the ballroom filled with successful aerospace professionals celebrating technical achievements and seemed to finally understand the caliber of work I'd been doing while she dismissed my career as creative limitation. When she asked if we could step outside to talk privately, I calmly explained that her continuous contact attempts over the past 18 months constituted documented harassment, and that I'd compiled comprehensive evidence of her efforts to circumvent my clearly stated desire for no communication. I pulled out my phone and showed her screenshots of emails, fake social media profiles, third-party messages, and professional networking attempts, all organized in a folder labeled with her name that demonstrated the systematic nature of her boundary violations. Her face went pale as she realized I'd been methodically documenting every attempt she'd made to breach my communication barriers, creating a legal record that could support restraining order proceedings if necessary. When Bryn began to emotionally collapse, begging me to remember what she called our shared creative journey and the meaningful connection we'd once had, I introduced her to my partner Sage, a brilliant astrophysicist I'd met through my astronomy club who specialized in stellar evolution research. Sage had been networking with other scientists across the room and approached us with the confident grace of someone who'd never questioned her own intellectual worth or felt threatened by analytical thinking. The contrast between Sage's genuine enthusiasm for scientific discovery and Bryn's desperate attempts to manufacture artistic relevance was immediately apparent to everyone in our vicinity. Sage greeted Bryn politely but with the detached courtesy you'd show to any service worker, clearly understanding the situation from my previous descriptions of my manipulative ex-girlfriend who'd tried to undermine my career confidence. I explained to Bryn that Sage and I had built a partnership based on mutual respect for each other's intellectual achievements, shared fascination with precision and discovery, and genuine appreciation for the analytical thinking she'd found so creatively oppressive. We discussed complex scientific concepts together, supported each other's professional ambitions, and created a relationship dynamic where both people contributed meaningfully rather than one person subsidizing the other's pretensions. Bryn stood there listening to me describe the kind of intellectual partnership she'd never been capable of providing, watching me with someone who actually understood and valued the work that had been paying for her artistic fantasies while she complained about feeling creatively suffocated. I concluded our encounter by thanking her for the text message that had declared she never wanted to hear from me again, explaining that it had provided the best guidance she'd ever offered me by forcing me to discover what I actually deserved in a relationship. I told her that I was finally implementing her original request by permanently severing all communication channels, and that seeing her working as event photography staff while I received industry recognition felt like perfect confirmation that we'd both ended up exactly where we belonged in life.